This is more important than you might think. Right around the inauguration, we saw 2 sets of presidential pardons from both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and the left-wing media is trying to create a false equivalency that we need to dispel once and for all. I don't think anyone did it better than Scott Jennings on CNN, which is why I want you to watch this for yourself before I tell you more about it.
With the pardons, what's your take on that?
Here's what I think. Were these people punished? Yes. Were they ruined financially? Yes. Did they spend time in jail? Yes. Have their lives been ruined? Absolutely. And one of you said earlier, Van or Axe, that you think this sends a terrible signal that you can get away with things like this, as though we've never had a moment in recent American history when people were not punished for rampaging around when they shouldn't have been. It was the summer of 2020. And these people were actually punished. Those people were never even charged.
That's not true at all.
That's not true. Most charges were not.
Let him answer. But I do see it differently in that I don't like it when people tear up buildings at all. I'm not a part of some pro-riot, pro-crime lobby.
Did you see that? Van Jones's reaction personifies the fact that even he understands how political violence is a bipartisan problem on both ends of the extreme. Yet you'll never hear him say it up front, even now in hindsight, looking back in both January 6th and the BLM riots in 2020. Back then, Van Jones was calling it the Great Awakening in an opinion piece for CNN, writing things like, "Once feared, dismissed, and reviled, Black Lives Matter has suddenly become one of the world's most beloved brands with exponentially growing support." Excuse me. There is no official name for the protest wave that is sweeping the globe, but this awakening has already racked up a long list of achievements, end quote. And yet there's hardly a qualifier you see from Van Jones that political violence of any sort is still unacceptable, much less one where nearly 24 people lost their lives. But I think the real masterstroke that Scott Jennings did here by bringing this up is to show that political violence is an unfortunate consequence of people whose frustrations and grievances have been bottling up. And that's a much deeper diagnosis than a panel like this expected.
Well, watching Donald Trump's day today, I'm just struck by the fact that we have a president again. I mean, look at this guy's day. 3 speeches, 196 executive actions, holds a 90-minute press conference narrating each one as he goes along. I mean, Joe Biden could not and would not offer the kind of transparency or vigor to the American people that we got here on day one from Trump. And tonight, Trump's going to throw on a tux and go to 3 balls. I mean, he's having an active day. I think it's going to be a massive amount of contrast here for a presidency like what we're going to see out of Trump and versus what we've had out of Biden. I was watching Trump today, and Van and I were talking earlier today, watching him walk down the hall of the Capitol, and the words that came to mind to me were gritty, resilient, determined, and audacious. There's not like a more perfect advertisement for the value of these qualities in modern America. I mean, you think about all the things that happened to him. Winning, losing, the court cases, nearly being assassinated. It's rather audacious what he has accomplished, winning this election and taking office today. And you said you were in shock. Well, Republicans are in awe.
And that is a perfect example of how even Donald Trump knows that the only way to channel public sentiment correctly is to give them what he campaigned on. And what's interesting is that if you look closer at this past election cycle, you realize that Trump even reached out to the centrist libertarians, like myself, even attending a libertarian convention in his campaign. And once president, he did even give them one thing he promised them, which is the pardon of Ross Ulbricht, who had been imprisoned for over a decade for creating a dark web website that ended up being misused for public illicit trades. But the larger point is that it's about putting something like the January 6 pardons into their full context, as well as the blanket presidential pardons that we saw from Joe Biden, meant to protect his own family right before he left office. Yet CNN and Van Jones insist on a narrow reading of the past that simply does injustice to the entire debate in the first place.
This could be interpreted by some people as a green light for right-wing political violence. That's not his intention, but it can be interpreted that way. Because why do you put people in jail? 3 reasons. You want to incapacitate dangerous people. You want to punish people for doing bad stuff. And you want to deter people from doing the same thing again. It looks like the federal government is no longer in the deterrence business when it comes to right-wing political violence. That is scary to me, and I am a criminal justice fanatic. I love people coming out of prison. But usually, when somebody comes out of prison, it's not right after they beat up a cop, maybe they did something else, and there's some idea that they've confessed, they've apologized, they've rehabilitated themselves, they've done some action, and then we say, now you get a second chance. This is a very dangerous thing that happened tonight, among many others. This is not shock and awe, it's shock and awful.
Why doesn't he have a sense of perspective? You don't even have to be partisan to realize that political violence or its glorification is something that both ends of the political spectrum need to guard against, and it almost always starts from seemingly good intentions. That's what we saw just recently when a segment of the far left online was cheering on the assassin of the United States healthcare CEO as some sort of rebellion against a corrupt medical system. That's how political violence breeds, and when you're talking about an event like J6 where the only person that lost their life was a Trump supporter named Ashley Babbitt, and keep in mind that was very unfortunate, it's at least worth putting it into the context of its time and understanding that no one that defended Joe Biden's blanket pardons or covered for political violence on the left had any moral high ground to lecture over it. And that's the big picture perspective that I don't think we would have seen on the CNN panel if Scott Jennings wasn't there to say something.
I mean, I think he's been plotting to do this for months and months and months, just like he was plotting to pardon Hunter Biden for months while lying to the American people about it. And this is the problem. If you want to be outraged about Donald Trump's January 6th pardons, it's just hard for me to muster the same kind of...
But you did call them...
Scott,
you did call them domestic terrorists.
Yes, look, I want to answer David because he addressed me about this earlier. I don't feel any differently about January 6th today as I felt on the day when you and I sat here about it. I don't feel any differently about it at all. It was a terrible day. It should not have happened. People should not have committed violent acts. And it was a stain on the end of Donald Trump's first term. However, I have taken in that event, his term, Biden's term, and then the American people took it all in, and they just rendered the ultimate adjudication for it. And the difference between the preemptive pardons and these pardons is the January 6 people, whether you like it or not, most of them did face severe punishment. Some have already been in jail and already out of jail. Yes, they got a pardon, but that doesn't mean they didn't face consequences for their actions. My problem with Biden is none of these preemptive pardons people are going to face any consequences. And
for what? For what, Scott? What are they? What crime did they rampage through the Capitol? What did they?
Tax evasion.
No, I'm not talking about Hunter Biden.
You tell me. Why did they need it then? Why did they need it?
Good question, and yet no one really has an answer. The fact is, this is an issue that over the last 4 years has drowned in the list of priorities for the everyday American, whether we like it or not. And even if you think there's grounds to criticize these pardons, perhaps pundits on CNN should show a proportionate outrage that doesn't make them appear blindly partisan. But let me know in the comments if you agree, because this is a debate that I think is eventually going to fizzle out of public relevance. Anyway, as these years go on and Americans face more pressing and immediate challenges in their lives.